In this pro tip, we're going to go over how to properly wax a mold or put mold release in a mold for casting foam. The molds I have here are my turkey head molds I use for my inserts for freeze drying turkey heads. This is the full strut mold, and this is the gobbling head mold. And I was doing quite a bit of head work this weekend, so I thought I'd do the pro tip on that. These molds are made out of a mixture of Bondo and resin, and then I put fiberglass over them to strengthen them. This is just fiberglass and resin. That's all it is. It's laminations. It's just like if you made a boat. It's the exact same thing. They're really tough and they're lightweight. With molds like this, if you're just casting foam out of them, a rigid mold made out of Bondo and resin, you could probably get 1,000 pulls out of them at least, as long as you're somewhat careful when you're separating the molds after you cast in them. They're really resilient. If you're going to be casting fiberglass in here, let's say you were making a reproduction, that would be much less of a mold life with those particular kind of molds. You'd want to use a tooling gel coat versus a Bondo resin gel coat like this. Waxing the mold is very important. That's what stops our foam from sticking into the mold. You need to have a good base of mold release built up. For my first run, I always like to put at least 3 coats of my mold release down, buffing between the coats before I even do one cast out of it. The mold release I'm using is Mother's Brazilian Carnauba. And this is the same stuff they put on cars. It's wax on, wax off. As the movie reference goes, it's the exact same thing. This is just an applicator pad you can buy at any automotive store, even Walmart. That's where I bought this wax and this pad. This is just a Walmart. It's inexpensive. I think you can get this for like 10 bucks. So I'm just going to take a little bit and put it on the applicator pad. And I'm going to apply it to the mold. Now these molds have been seasoned, or they have a lot of mold release in them already. So I don't need to put a lot of coats on here. And you don't want to get your mold release too thick either. Just a nice even coat. Just like that. Now you want to let this dry and then you want to buff it. I normally will take this and put this in front of a fan. It cuts the drying time in half. If you're just letting them air dry, I'd say at least an hour in front of a fan, 10-15 minutes, they should be done. After it's completely dried, you want to buff it really good. And I use my applicator pad for that. I have a separate pad I use for buffing. It's the same procedure. Just buff it until it starts to shine, and you can see that shine. And sometimes when this dries, it'll have like a little bit of a white residue, and you can buff that out. Then you know you have a nice, good buff on your mold release. And then you are ready to cast once you have it all buffed. When you're doing foam molding like this, you always want to make sure you have a blowhole in the mold. And you can see mine there. What that does is that allows the excess foam to escape, and also any air and gases are pushed out of that hole, and you get a really nice rigid cast out of your mold. You don't want to put too small amount of foam in that you don't have anything coming out of your blowhole. You can see here that I've had quite a bit of foam come out here, and I just break it off when I'm done. You can also put some mold release on this side of your mold, so when you do have that foam blowing out, it's easy to pry off. Another way you can do it is you just turn your mold upside down and let that foam go into a garbage can. And after you pour your foam in a mold like this, I like to let it sit at least a half an hour. If you try to demold it too quick, it will not demold correctly because the foam on the edges, which is this area here, takes longer to cure out than the foam on the inside of the mold. And so when you try to break it up, it just is going to break apart. You can use this particular method to make forms in your shop for birds, mammals, fish. It's really good to have that technology in your shop. If you have a certain kind of let's say a bird body that you use a lot of, You can go ahead and carve your own form, make the mold, and you can pound those things out and you'll never have to buy another form again. It's also great for doing custom work. If you have a mammal you have to make a custom form for, this is a good way to do it. Because you're using urethane, it dries rigid, and that's ideal for birds and for mammal mounting. So if you have any questions on mold making or on the foam casting process, be sure to jump on to the Taxidermy Insider Forum and I'll be happy to help. We worked on a lot of things this week. One of the things we worked on was quite a few fish. This is a muskie that was caught in Illinois. I mounted this week. I put this on a purchased form. I've been kind of going that way lately on some muskies and northerns if I can get away with it, if they look good. And this one looked really good. The client wanted kind of a sagging belly look, which isn't really natural for a fish. It's more of a look you're going to get if you're holding the fish in a picture. But I did modify the form a little bit to get a little bit of a sag in the gut on it for him, and he was fine with that. I sent him a picture of it. I also finished up that really large muskie I was working on for the last month. You can see a picture of that now. That was a Great Lakes muskie caught in Lake St. Clair in Michigan. It's been in my freezer for 13 years, but I had one of my good clients request a very large tiger muskie. He's just a collector and he just wants to have it on display in his house. So we mounted that one up for him, and we went ahead and painted it like a tiger muskie. We also made a few other modifications to the fish. We modified the top jaw and we modified some of the fins to make them look a little bit more like a tiger versus just a muskie. Also, you can see right now on your screen a tiger trout. That was for the same client. This was actually a brook trout that had some tiger trout leanings. What I mean by that is some of the markings actually looked like a tiger trout, but it wasn't a tiger trout. We went ahead and painted it like a tiger trout and pushed it the rest of the way for our client. He wanted to have two tiger fish on display on the same wall. I think that's kind of a cool concept, and it shows the hybridization between the northern and the muskie and the brook trout and the brown trout, as you can see right there. I also worked on putting a lot of heads in the freeze dryer this week. You can see some of my molds and how they're lined up. All the heads are put on these molds right before they go into the freezer after they're injected, and then they go into the freeze dryer. When you're freeze drying, everything goes into the freezer first, so it pre-freezes before it goes into the dryer. And you can see right now an example of one of the turkeys I put on one of my molds. What I want you to really focus in on this is the skull position in conjunction with the neck position. That's extremely important with a gobbling turkey, that they look similar to this. While turkeys certainly can gobble in other positions other than this, this shows the skull alignment and how it connects to the neck and how that works with the rest of the bird. It makes the mounting process much easier if you work with a head that has the correct anatomy, and this one does exhibit that. And that's what I was going for when I carved my inserts. As you saw earlier in the video with one of my molds, that's one of the inserts I carved, molded, and that's what I'm using for this bird.
In this video segment, we're going to go over different gloss top coats to go over your deer's noses. This deer has been finished. I did all the detail work on the nose. I didn't mess around with a lot of different flesh colors. It was just painted. I mixed a little black with white and gave a little bit of a gray coloration. That's normally what I do on most of my production deer heads. You could go down with a layer of flesh if you wanted to first and go in between the nodules, give a little bit more detail. So the nose has been detailed out with Mod Podge, and the way that I do my noses is I take a syringe and I fill it with Mod Podge, and then I cut the tip off so you get rid of that sharp point. Then you just open the needle back up and you can just squirt some out. This is dried in there though, so I have to cut down a little bit, but then I just do the detailing work like this on each nodule. Normally I use Gary Bowen's Super Fish Gloss to gloss my deer noses. I'll spray some into a little container and then brush it on. However, we're switching more over to water-based in the new shop. So on this one, I use this Hydro Mist Gloss Top Coat 200. It was an extremely humid day when I did it, so I don't know if it was the humidity or if it was just this new gloss top coat. But when I brushed this over the nose, it turned temporarily the Mod Podge a grayish color. And it was one of those moments in the taxidermy shop where you start pulling your hair out and wondering if you just ruined your entire nose job and you have to go in and repaint everything. But after about 10 minutes, that grayish color on the Mod Podge went away, it went back to transparent, and everything worked out really good. So again, I can't say if it was the gloss top coat or if it was the high humidity that day that caused that to happen, but it did go away. So if you would use this and you see your Mod Podge turn gray, it most likely will go back to clear. I also use it around the eyes to give a little bit of detail on the lower lid. On most of my deer heads, I only do the lower lid. If you wanted to, you could flip the deer around and do the top lid, but you always run the risk of that gloss running on the eye. So I normally just do the lower lid. It gives a lot of nice depth. So yeah, this is one we finished up this week. Turned out nice. This is on the Mackenzie 6900 series. I really like these deer forms. I know 50% of the taxidermists like them, 50% don't. I like them because they give you a big neck on a deer. Some taxidermists say that's not natural, and that's fine. They're entitled to that opinion. But all that I know is the customers love that huge neck, and so that's why we use these, and they fit the Wisconsin deer really nice. They're a nice, modern, updated form, nice brisket, good facial features, detailing. The ears fit in nice, the horns, everything just works really good for our heavy frame northern deer.